Thank you, everyone. My name is Jimmy D, and I am a grateful child of God that has recovered from the pain of alcoholism. Will you join me in prayer? Heavenly Father, I ask you to come into this room, to be with us tonight. I ask you to be with everyone in this room and open their hearts and minds to the words I'm about to share, the words of what you did in my life when I let you in and I came closer to you and you came closer to me. I pray that you touch someone in this room or everyone in this room tonight so they leave here with a better outlook of the things you do in people's lives. I pray that in your name. Amen. First and foremost, I'd like to thank my beautiful wife for being here tonight and to support me and putting up with me for all these years. My sobriety date is January 16th, 2018. I was born in January of '82, a little town outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I was actually born, my mother went into labor during the halftime of the Super Bowl that year. It was the 49ers versus Cincinnati Bengals. And I like to say that's the first time I thought I was like the life of the party. I was born into a hard-working, middle-class family. My first memories of a bar were my pap actually picking me up from elementary school and taking me to Craniac's Bar in downtown Glassport to shoot pool. And that was right after elementary school every day. I'd sit there and eat Slim Jims. The local drunks would pass a milk crate around the pool table as I socialized with the neighborhood patrons. He would then take me home reeking of Coca-Cola and cigarette smoke. My dad used to get so angry at that. There were a lot of parties in my family growing up. Everyone drank, and I mean everyone. There was no get-together, event, practice, funeral, wedding, baptism, surgery, grocery visit, picnic, birthday party, fishing or dentist appointment that didn't involve alcohol. I remember going anywhere at that age, and any man in my family would involve a red Playmate Kohler with the lid that flipped over and at least a sixer in it. At this age, I was getting very curious about being an adult. They always looked like they were having so much fun, laughing and joking and carrying on, never really seeing what was going on behind the scenes from the abuse of alcohol. My first experience drinking enough alcohol to feel the effects, though, did not come until I was a senior in high school. We got a local drunk to buy me and my buddies a case of beer. My mom was away for the weekend, and we drank in my house. I remember all my buddies throwing up everywhere off a few beers. And I was sitting on the back porch laughing that my face was numb, drinking probably twice as much as them. I didn't even realize it at the time, but my tolerance level was high before I even started. After high school, I got signed up for a carpenter's apprenticeship program from the local union, like 3 days after graduating. I started working. I was making a living right out of high school, and this allowed me a small apartment. My apartment was so small that you could actually go to the bathroom, watch TV, and flip eggs on the stove at the same time. But I didn't care. I loved it, and I loved the freedom that came with it. Across the street from the apartment was a strip mall. It had a laundromat and a bar. Wednesday nights, I would go there to do my laundry and eat at the bar next door's wing night. This allowed me to make really good friends with the bartenders and owners. My relationship grew with them, and at 18 years old, I was hanging out there on Friday and Saturday nights when it turned into a nightclub. This is when I started to consume alcohol on a regular basis. The effects that alcohol had on me at this time was a huge sense of confidence from a few drinks. I then moved my drinking to downtown and was running with some well-connected Italian kids from the Bloomfield, Little Italy area of Pittsburgh. Every Friday and Saturday night in my early 20s was spent in a nightclub downtown in Pittsburgh. I thought at this time this would be me for the rest of my life, and I was fine with it. Around this time in my life, I was out of my apartment into my first home. As soon after my home purchase, a big building boom hit New York, power plants. I rented out my home, and I was off to Niagara Falls, New York. I enjoyed the Buffalo area at first. I thought it was similar to Pittsburgh. The food was amazing, but even more so than Pittsburgh, Buffalo was cold, gray atmosphere, and very little summer. So most of my free time was in bars and casinos. It's here that I started to develop some anxiety and some trouble with the law. I was pulled over twice for DUI, was able to get by with a slap on the wrist. Now, my father was starting to come back into my life. He kept telling me about this new town, Cincinnati, Ohio, where he was living. I went to visit him a few times and thought it was great. Definitely better weather than what I was dealing with in Buffalo. He had a job opening and offered it to me, and I could live with him. So I took it. I packed my stuff, I left Buffalo, and I headed to Cincinnati. We lived on a golf course, and it had its own pub. It was great. Didn't have to drive anywhere, and it too turned into a nightclub on the weekends, Friday and Saturday nights. It was a lot of fun at first, but shortly after I moved there, my drinking became worse. I fell into a deep depression. My dad and I did not spend as much time together as I thought. My best friends became my boss and a washed-up golf pro who drank a fifth of scotch a day, which in turn rubbed off on me. I was in the morning, I was taking a few shots to stop the shakes and jitters. I was drinking cheap liquor all night and throwing up constantly. I would quit drinking here and there for a day or two just so I would quit throwing up, and then I'd start all over again. I remember going to visit my brothers and my mom on a vacation in Myrtle Beach. The whole way there and back on the plane, I asked God to take it, to crash it, and take me from this misery. I wanted to reach out to my family while I was there, but I couldn't do it. Now back in Ohio, my skin and the whites of my eyes were turning yellow. My grandfather, my dad's dad, suddenly passed, and we came home for a funeral. I was walking into the church, and my brother grabbed and said I looked terrible. My cousin Angie looked at me, who I haven't seen in a while, grabbed me and asked if I needed help. I looked sick. I remember going into the bathroom at the funeral, looking in the mirror, and I could not believe what was staring back at me. Here was a guy a few short years ago, always had a fresh haircut, new clothes on, smelled good, looked good. Now I was looking like this thing, mismatched clothes, unshaven, hair was a mess with yellow skin and eyes. I looked like death. I have no photos from this time in my life, or I would show you. I stayed away from photography. When we got back to Ohio, I had some extra money, so I sprung and got a bottle of Eagle Reserve Kentucky bourbon. I don't know how I just remembered that, but I put it on this testimony. I was sitting on a bench on the golf course, drinking it from the brown paper bag that it came in. Something came over me, and I cried out to the heavens above. God help me, I cannot do this any longer. Something inside of me told me to get sober and to get home to Pittsburgh. In my distress, I called upon the Lord. Yes, I cried to my God, and from his temple he heard my voice, and my cry for help came into his ears. 2 Samuel 22:7. I packed what I could in my truck, I sobered up as best as I could, and I left. It was a 5-hour journey. I stopped every 30 to 60 minutes on the side of the highway to vomit. I got to my mom's and I fell into the door. She called for my brother and my stepdad. They put me in a car and they took me to Jefferson Hospital. There I spent 3 days in the ICU. I don't remember much more than all the medications and shot that were pumping into me and people saying I was not going to make it. For 3 days, I was unconscious and coming in and out. On the third day, I woke up to my pap looking at me. He didn't say much. And asked if I wanted him to buy me TV for a couple days. I said, no, I just wanted to rest. He didn't talk to me about anything. He didn't talk about anything to me. I know he wanted to, but he drank as well every night, so, what can he possibly say? I think he may have felt a little guilty now, more I think about it. He passed away, and I got sober, and I hope he is proud of me now. I miss him dearly. After a week in the hospital, they ruled me out in the 10-degree weather, where I sat in the cold waiting for my mom to pick me up. I spent more than a year sober. I think it was just from the fear of everything I went through. I got back into the union carpentry work. I was quiet again and just work and came home, not doing much. After a year, I remember I was at a family function. My aunt, who was drunk, asked if I had drank anything lately, and I said no. She said, I don't believe you. She then said, you really can't drink for the rest of your life. That statement right there put me off into a mission where I would try to find out how to drink like a normal person. But I am afraid of that. As the serpent deceived Eve by his craftiness, your minds will be led astray from the simplicity and purity of devotion to Christ. 2 Corinthians 11:3. Within a few months of that mission, I ended up in Cleveland Clinic Rehab near Andover, Ohio. There, I learned a lot about alcoholism in that rehab. See, I didn't know anything about alcoholism up until this point. I thought I had depression issues. Right before I went into rehab, I was talking to a very nice young lady online. I reached back out to her and I told her where I went, why I was MIA for a few weeks, and that I may have a problem drinking. I figured then, if she told me to get lost, I'd know why. Needless to say, a year later, we were married. We married in Jamaica. I drank during our week there, and I was able to keep it together somehow. After we were married was the first time I drank up and ended up in the hospital again, alone, with no one but my mother. She was so confused. I didn't want to do this to her, but I just didn't know how to stop. I stayed sober for a little, and we decided to move to Florida. Florida went well for a little while, and then I started drinking again here and there. Ending up in the hospital one or two more times. Her patience was wearing thin. Then something amazing happened. We got pregnant. I thought to myself, this is it. My reason to completely give up the booze. We went to the doctor to get ultrasounds, and they told us everything looked good to come back in a few weeks. Next appointment, and bad news. The baby had quit growing. They said to give it to the next appointment. We did, and then more bad news. We were told the baby had stopped growing, and we were to have a miscarriage. We were devastated. This is my wife's only wish in life, is to have a child of her own. It was given to her and ripped away. But what do? I take a horrible situation and I make it 10 times worse by getting drunk. All of these emotions were too much to bear. I remember calling out again, screaming at the top of my lungs, God, I need you. I don't want to do this anymore. I remember that weekend, he put it in my heart to go back to church. It was Father's Day weekend. I found a church of my childhood denomination, First Cape Methodist. I went and sat in the back so no one could see me. I didn't listen to anything the pastor said that day. I just sat there full of anxiety and shame. I opened the handout and read through it. There at the bottom of the last page was an ad for CR, and it said to call this leader guy. So I did. I left Mr. Leader Guy a message. Shortly later, he returned my call. He asked me to meet there early on a Monday evening before CR. I met with him. I explained to him my situation. I walked into a large group that night not knowing what to expect. Everyone was greeting me and smiling. People were dancing and swinging from the chandeliers. This leader guy gets to the podium, and he's up there hooting and hollering. I'm thinking, these people are nuts. I went for a while. I enjoyed it, but I was not getting involved. Didn't get an accountability partner or sponsor, and didn't really start building any relationships with anyone. Eventually, even though you had everything I wanted in these rooms, I quit coming, and it led me to drink one last time. I remember coming home that night drunk, and the look on my wife's face is one I'll never forget for the rest of my life. It was like every muscle in her face went limp. The look of disappointment was overwhelming. I decided I was never going to see that look again, so I called Mr. Leader Guy again. I explained where I had been and what had happened. He met me again. He told me to get a sponsor, accountability person, and I asked him how. He looked at me and he said, "You ask." I said, "Oh." I was like, "Oh." Looking at me with this funny look on his face, I mustered up the courage to ask him. He said, "Yeah, dummy." He said, "But you have to do me this promise. You have to promise me that you will do anything to stay sober, and I will never ask you to do something I didn't do." I agreed, and that was the day my life changed forever. He made me get a home group in AA. I did. Get all kinds of commitments in CR. A few weeks later, he had me deep in the woods with a bunch of men for an entire weekend devoted to praising God. I started to work the steps. I went through a step study. I did a fourth and fifth step, admitting everything I've done to God and to another person. I made a list of everyone I've harmed. I made amends when possible and became willing to make the opportunities become available. I started to learn how to live in God's will, how to be honest, trustworthy, a faithful man of God. I started to make friends again. I started to have emotions again, like laughing and crying. I got sponsees, someone to trust in me for guidance. I made amends to my wife when she allowed me to. She trusts me with everything I do now, except the checkbook. One night, shortly after I got sober, she was on a flight from Pittsburgh back here to Fort Myers, and it was rerouted to Fort Lauderdale. I got to drive across the state in the middle of the night and pick her up. I was so happy that I was able to do that. I didn't say that out loud to her, but I was. She said I saved the day. That was a new phrase to my ears. I haven't heard that much in my past. Everyone usually saved my day. I had led 3 step studies now. I had worked with troubled teens for a little while, and I was a big brother to two boys before they went to go live with their mom in Tampa. I'm always committed to service. I speak every chance I get. My employer loves me. He trusts me on the biggest projects, and I'm constantly getting promoted because I do what I'm told now. I take orders as orders and not as suggestions. I recently had to work out of town for a whole year, only home on the weekends. As soon as I moved my belongings to the town I was working in, I got connected into AA and CR. I became a CR leader in Vero Beach. I led a step study and gave my testimony there several times. I did everything exactly the same as if I was living full-time at home. I stayed sober for a whole year away from my home. When I go home to Pittsburgh, now I pick up all my nephews and my niece. I put them all in a rental car, and we go and we do whatever we want, whatever they want, actually, because all my family trusts me now. They all know the man I am now and the changes God has done in my life. I have clean haircuts now. My clothes match most of the time. I smell good again because my wife picks out my cologne. My brother Buddy, who doubted religion for many years, has now found God. He has such a strong spiritual connection with Jesus, it's overwhelming to hear about. And now he is a strong spiritual man for his wife and kids. It's really unbelievable. My life is incredible. Even when I look back on the disappointments during my recovery, they're not really that bad and are more of learning lessons. Because your outlooks change when you know God is in charge of everything. So if you're new, buckle up, Buttercup, and keep coming back. I make this program very simple. I talk to God every morning and night. I invite him into everything I do. I stay committed to a few meetings a week. I'm always involved in some kind of service, and that is it. You do these things, I promise you're going to live the best life you ever thought possible. Come and come persistently. Listen to everything God does in people's lives. Learn how to use him from their experiences, and soon you'll be up here sharing your victories to help others. I love you all, and God bless. Thanks, Graham.